Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the panel session on Shelter from the Storm, a Changing Climate for Affordable Housing. My name is Russell Paez, and I am with the Institute for Sustainable Communities. We have a great panel discussion lined up for you this afternoon. Before we get to that, we will be hearing a video from Commissioner Melissa McKinley. Go ahead.
I think a community's toughest challenges to responding to climate change are financial and political. We have a large contingency in our country that doesn't believe in climate change, despite seeing an increase in torrential downpours and flooding and tornadoes and hurricanes and wildfires, all of those things that are signs of increasing temperatures across the globe. Too many people deny that they exist. And then the other thing is it's going to cost money to address this problem. So financial and political, I think, are our two biggest challenges. So anything that impacts the water tables is having an impact inland, as in addition to having an impact on the coast. Climate change also, we're seeing significant increases in the strength of natural disasters, of hurricanes that are coming our way and across the state of Florida and across the country. A lot of our infrastructure in the Glades community is very old and not built to withstand those kinds of natural disasters. So I'm really concerned about climate change. I think that they're gravely concerned about what the future looks like for them, what we as the current middle-aged to older age adults in this country, how we're leaving it for the future. They're seeing an increase in insurance rates. They're seeing an increase in the impact to their health. They're seeing a difficulty in finding places to live that are affordable. All of that is impacted by not having a resilient community, and I think they're worried about that. So I think a lot of people are shocked to learn that Palm Beach County in the western side, which is the area I've had the pleasure of representing for the last 7 years, is the 5th largest agricultural county in the United States. The top 4 are all in California, which makes us the largest agricultural production area east of California. So that sweet corn that you just ate this last Thanksgiving, those green beans, the sugar that was used to make your apple pie and your pumpkin pie, that was all grown in Palm Beach County.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for those words. Next, we're going to kick off the panel discussion. Today's moderator is Lauren Westmoreland. Ms. Westmoreland is the Vice President of Energy and Sustainability with Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future. In this organization, Lauren leads the environmental initiatives, including the Bringing Sustainability Home, which is a cross-cutting energy and health initiative that aims to ensure that low-income residents and communities have equal access to critical environmental and health benefits. Prior to joining this organization, Ms. Westmoreland led the Enterprise Green Communities state and local policy initiative at Enterprise Community Partners and developed and led the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance Built Environment portfolio. Before I turn it over to Lauren, please submit any questions through the Q&A tab, and questions will be answered following the panel discussion. Lauren, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Russell. And thank you for inviting me and this excellent panel to be here today to talk about a very important subject, affordable housing and the intersection of that with climate resiliency. The pandemic has reminded us and reaffirmed to all of us that just how important home is, a place to live and to be comfortable and safe and healthy. At the same time, we know that South Florida is facing climate change to unprecedented levels. Ensuring that we're working at that intersection of affordable housing is vital to make sure that our communities are accessible to all long term. And I'm really excited with this to talk to this panel and learn more about the efforts that are happening down in that space in South Florida. So let me go ahead and introduce our panelists, and then we'll move into our first question and give them an opportunity to talk a little bit more about who they are and what they're doing. So I'll introduce Jonathan Brown with Palm Beach County Department of Housing and Economic Development, Jennifer Posner with University of Miami, Lori Schumann with Enterprise Community Partners, and Andrew Velo Arias with Related Urban. Let's go ahead and head into our first question. So to each of you, what work are you doing at the intersection of affordable housing and climate resilience? Jonathan, let's hand it off to you first.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Lauren and the panel. I'm really glad to be here with you all today. Working for the Department of Housing and Economic Development for Palm Beach County, housing is a very, very critical issue for us, as well as the resiliency aspect of housing and affordable housing. The county has provided a number of tools, a number of programs that we were able to administer to really touch the lives of those that we are assisting. Our mission within this department is changing lives and transforming neighborhoods into balanced communities. So we're looking at the affordable housing aspect. We're looking at the workforce housing aspect. We're also looking at that intersection of how do we ensure the homes we are participating in developing are resilient, as well as building communities where business opportunities, job opportunities are available. You know, I am reminded of a company, I used to hear this, their ad many, many years ago, BASF, and how they don't make a lot of the products you buy, they make them better. In Palm Beach County, we may not be directly building the houses, we may not be directly building the buildings for businesses, but we are providing the finances, we're providing the government processes that make these homes and businesses better.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that introduction and a little bit more about what Palm Beach County is doing. Let's hand it over to Jennifer now to introduce herself and talk a little bit more about what she's doing at the intersection of affordable housing and community resilience.
Great. Thanks so much, Lauren. Great to be here and learn about what you all are doing and talk a little bit about what we're doing. I'm in the Office of Civic and Community Engagement at the University of Miami. A big part of what our office does is sort of bring information and knowledge about civic mindedness to academics, be it through course offerings, seminars for engaging faculty in more experiential learning within their classroom. We have programs with high school students, and also kind of mid-level career professionals. So that's a big part of what we do. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, which we're very excited about. But when we started, another kind of side of what we did was we wanted to kind of focus on how we could leverage university resources in the larger community. And so we started looking at affordable housing, which then was kind of, the big issue of the day. And I think there had been some thought, well, maybe we'll switch to a different topic moving on. 10 years later, affordable housing is still one of the most critical issues that we face in Miami. So we have been a resource and, kind of worked really closely with municipalities, nonprofit, community partners, to just help inform and be part of these conversations about how we can increase, improve, streamline, identify ways that we can impact vulnerable communities. As South Florida has become sort of ground zero for so many of these climate issues, a couple of years ago, we received a grant to look at the impacts of specifically sea level rise on affordable housing development. So how are our increased flooding risks, storm surge, that kind of thing, going to impact our existing affordable housing, going to, kind of help us make decisions about where to locate future affordable housing. And that has now been included in one of our publicly accessible free mapping tools on our website, which is a big part of what we do, is provide free publicly accessible data-driven mapping tools to just help inform community conversations and decision-making. We are currently expanding on that sea level rise work that we kicked off and are now looking at the impacts of extreme heat on populations, vulnerable populations, on how they specifically impact people living in affordable housing, on those actual physical developments. And you know, it's a if there's ever to say a good time, this has been it's been a beneficial time to be working on this, as so much discussion and attention has been placed on this, rightfully so, with this being, you know, the cause of mortality larger than any other natural hazard. So that's where we are, trying to bring these two pieces together and provide information on how people can use that information to make decisions.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. And that research on extreme heat is so vital right now. We know that there's been a lot of looking at, you know, what happens with extreme cold, but less so on extreme heat. So thank you for sharing all the work that y'all are doing. Lori, let's hand it over to you.
Thank you, Lauren, and it's great to be here with everyone and to talk about this important critical topic. Coming off the heels of some key announcements made this week by federal agencies, doubling down on the commitment of the White House to supporting disadvantaged communities, as is defined by the White House, and ensuring that we tackle the climate changing crisis, as some people call it, directly, and providing the funding and resources to do that. So this is a critical moment for us. And in the affordable housing industry, we've been feeling the risks of a changing climate and the risks of natural hazards for millennia. We at Enterprise have been working for close to 40 years to address America's massive shortage of affordable housing. And unfortunately, the challenge of having a lack of affordable housing, a lack of safe affordable housing, has only grown worse and more seemingly intractable as the years go by, and as the gap between the rich and poor continues to grow wider and wider, and made even more extreme by the latest crisis, the pandemic that has swept across the nation. We are at Enterprise the only national nonprofit that does everything from creating solutions, deploying capital, and advancing community development under one roof. So we come to the place of climate risk reduction and affordable housing from every angle. My role is to lead Enterprise's climate risk reduction work from both the partners side, or our nonprofit side, as well as our capital side, where we have an emerging support in terms of trying to figure out how do we move the market around this. We're organized around three basic and central goals highlighted by our strategic plan this year, which is A, to increase our housing supply of affordable housing. B, to advance racial equity and ensure that that communities of color and developers of color are given the support needed to lead and address this critical issue. And then finally, to build resiliency and upward mobility in the communities we serve. We are ensuring that our communities that need our support around climate risk reduction are prioritized. And I'd like to share an example of how we're doing this with you all. We have a program in Florida that was started in Miami called Keep Safe Miami. It's a partnership that was founded by the City of Miami, SSDN, and Chase to help more than, at this point, 100 affordable housing developers across Miami, Miami-Dade, Miami Beach, assess their needs around climate change and climate risk. And we provide these developers with the tools they need to reduce their risk to climate change. Well, I'm happy to announce today to all of you that Truist Bank has become our newest partner, and we're going to be scaling this program statewide. So would love to work with all of you to try to figure out how we can advance equity and resiliency for affordable housing owners, operators, and developers across the state of Florida, to make sure that our housing for the most vulnerable communities in Florida will thrive and sustain throughout the next 100 years. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lori. And that's a fantastic announcement about the statewide effort that Keep Safe will be moving towards. Andrew, let's move over to you to hear more about how you're working at the intersection of affordable housing and resiliency.
Thank you, Lauren. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Vello. I'm a development manager with Related Urban, which is the affordable and workforce housing division of the Related Group. So I've been working in this space for about 5 years now. Personally been involved in the design and construction and development of about 2,000 units throughout South Florida. Our projects are always seeking a green certification from the different ratings agencies. So that's one small way in which we're at the intersection of this space. But more broadly, I think the county commissioner's remarks at the outset were spot on, because as climate change continues to render more areas of our South Florida, communities undevelopable or unlivable in because of sea level rise and other issues, that further exacerbates the affordable housing crisis that we're in, where there's less supply when we're already in a position where supply is not enough to meet the demand that we have here in South Florida. So, doing my small part, dropping the bucket perhaps to try to deliver affordable housing developments to help meet that need, and doing so in a way that has a long-term considerations in mind. Where in our division, we own, operate, and keep these assets for the long term. So our incentives are aligned in that we want to have our developments be resilient, not just for the broader community, but also for ourselves, to make sure that we can hold on to these assets for the long term and not have significant capital in upgrades and investments needed in a short period of time.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And you may call it a drop in the bucket, but 2,000 units means 2,000 homes for people who didn't necessarily have access to that before. So incredibly important. Thank you. Let's move into our first question, or our second question, I should say. So I will go ahead and share and then pass it off to one of our panelists to start. Due to historic systemic racism in our housing systems, people of lower income and people of color often feel the impacts of climate change the first and the hardest. How are you working to do things differently than the past to ensure equity? How are you engaging with these communities? And what sort of strategies are you starting to see put in place, whether it's around high heat burdens, greening infrastructure, etc. Jonathan, let's hand it off to you first.
Yes, no, a great question. It is so important that we engage with the community. And, oftentimes we find ourselves speaking from our offices, speaking from podiums and platforms, but it actually takes grassroots efforts in meeting with the community, whether you're talking about the residents, in addition to the municipalities we need to meet with, the businesses. We have to make the concerted effort to actually go into those communities, meet with those residents, and begin to talk about what are their concerns, what are their needs, what are their issues. I am a firm believer that you cannot begin to address issues, whether it is related to systemic racism or anything, until you begin to hear the voice of the community. So as the county, we do that. We go into communities, we'll hold meetings with the communities, whether they're public meetings, whether they're meetings with certain neighborhoods, whether they're meetings with the elected officials, the city governments. We go into those communities, we meet with those homeowners, we talk about what their true needs are, and then we try to build our programs or aspects of our programs around what it is that they need. We understand how they're impacted by something like a hurricane, natural disasters that are going on around the county. Why is it that we continue to see our low and very low income homeowners or residents at the big box stores trying to secure hurricane materials? At what point are we, as whether local government or the development community, the owners of these properties, at what point are we going to put in things that will allow us to turn that around? And from Palm Beach County's perspective, we're doing that. Hurricane hardening is a key, one of the keys to our programs. And, it's not just putting up hurricane shutters. I mean, everybody is doing that. We're putting up impact windows. We don't want our affordable residents, whether it's the single mother or whether it's the senior, trying to put up shutters. And so we're providing impact windows, we're providing impact doors. We're looking at those things that are going to be most beneficial to the homes. As part of our rehab programs, at the conclusions, we're doing 4-point inspections, because in addition to wanting to make sure your home is hardened, we want to also help you reduce your insurance costs. And so it's going to take those efforts. It's going to take those thinking out of the box, doing those things that are really going to benefit our communities, specifically our communities of color and our communities that have not received the level of attention that they should have received in previous years.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. I'll open it up. Lori, you want to comment?
Thanks, Lauren. The two things I'd like to share with everyone is that we believe at Enterprise, and I mean, I believe this personally and professionally, that housing is infrastructure. And housing should be addressed as such. In fact, we testified on the Hill last year before the infrastructure bill was shaped and passed, that we need to consider housing as the end user of the infrastructure that is built and funded in the communities, particularly the communities that have faced decades of disinvestment, communities of color that are dealing with infrastructure that has not been appropriately funded and operated and maintained because of political and various other issues that have not placed this infrastructure a top priority. That infrastructure needs to be tied directly to housing, and such, and because of that, housing needs to be built and defined and developed and operated to be able to be a positive contributor to infrastructure in a community and to be able to help bolster the community's resiliency. The second thing I'll say towards that excellent question is, in our opinion, in my opinion, housing should be a regenerative force in the community, meaning housing should give back more. Buildings should give back more to the community than take from the community. And it creates a virtuous cycle so that you have healthy housing, healthy communities, supporting the community, ensuring that those buildings stand, that the tax base is in place. So there's a connection between these two systems that often does not get articulated.
Thanks, Lori. Andrew or Jennifer?
Sure, I can jump in there. I think Lori's absolutely right that housing can be a force for good in a community. One of the things we've observed here in South Florida and Miami in particular is some of the historically underinvested areas are now suddenly more attractive because they're at higher ground. So one example is the Liberty City neighborhood in Miami, where we're actively redeveloping a large parcel there. In the surrounding areas, you see there's a lot of private investors that are coming in and buying up, vacant lots, single family homes, and kind of land banking with the expectation that, hey, this area is going to become more and more attractive because of its higher ground. And so that accelerates forces of gentrification in a way that if there isn't good policy to try to mitigate that and channel that private investment for good, it could really lead to adverse outcomes. If you want good visualizations of these things, Jennifer's mapping tools can do wonders. I'm sure she'll speak to that a little bit. But one thing that I'll say that we can do in the development community that we've started doing here at Related Urban is engaging local residents in the actual construction and management of these properties. And so getting into the construction industry can be lucrative for some folks, but there's also barriers to entry and apprenticeship and training that's needed. And there has been conversation about the general kind of green infrastructure and how that could be a job creation mechanism for our country. I think similarly, affordable housing and resilient building methods within affordable housing could be a job creation tool for local communities if we take the time and do the proper investments to actually engage those community members themselves in the construction and ultimately the operation of these buildings. And I think that's one way that you can go about channeling that private investment for good.
I will add, thank you, Andrew, for the shout out about the map tool. That's very, very nice. And I think the fact that, all of the work that everybody on this panel is doing is so major and transformative. And the fact that we're talking about it is a big change from where things had been, that, there had just been sort of disinvestment. That's the way it is. Public housing, it's not great. And I think we're seeing a huge change in the way that all of this has been talked about and kind of become a real active and guiding part of these conversations. I think from our perspective, the use of kind of just data to inform communities about what's going on is one of the more powerful ways that they can help, particularly with gentrification. I think that we hear about climate gentrification a lot, and it's almost become like a dirty word. It's this, bad thing. I think what that kind of, those feelings and those concerns can often breed is just a real community commitment. Communities have the ability to turn some of those practices through creative policies, through, channeling and talking about what they want and what they would like their community to look like. And I think that's kind of, one of the ways that you, address those concerns. I think, being able to visualize what's going on in communities, I think of the work that Mapping Inequality, which is it got a lot of great publicity. There was a great article in the New York Times a couple of years ago, but they have really systematically gone through and looked at every city that had a redlining map from the New Deal days, and laid on top of that the tree coverage, the tree canopy, and shown, it's just absolutely clear that disinvestment and those patterns and those habits have remained, that the areas that were deemed least desirable are treated that way, or have been developed in that way through the present. So I think the kind of just really drawing attention to these issues and having them be at the forefront of conversations about development is a huge, to me, feels like a big impact, and I hopefully will continue and make real changes.
Thanks, Jennifer. No, that's a really important point. We can't talk about what we don't know about, and the level of transparency that I think both, the academic and nonprofit and private sector is bringing to the forefront, and the way that we see governments now responding to it that they haven't previously. I think that's productive, and obviously there's a lot more work to do, but this is a step in the right direction. Let's talk a little bit more about steps in the right direction and dig deeper into what we see governments, whether it's state, local, or federal governments, doing to address these challenges. What are some innovative policies or programs you're creating or that you've seen to require, incentivize, or promote more resilient development of affordable housing? Jonathan, you shared a great one around hurricane hardening, but I'm sure that is not the only thing that y'all are working on.
It's the tip of the iceberg. One of the programs that Palm Beach County created a few years ago was our workforce housing program, which is an inclusionary zoning program. Now, ironically, we've tried, and by we, I mean communities have tried to allow the development of community to kind of address the situation. And what's happened is that we continue to see houses built, but the houses may or may not be affordable. And so I think this was the perfect solution for Palm Beach County. We've established over 2,500 units have been built. Rental and home ownership have been built. And we're continuing to stress that. That program requires any developer building within our urban suburban tier that they must set aside workforce housing units. The thing I love about this program is that we don't just talk about it, but we also say these are the max sales prices for these units. One of the things that you'll hear often thrown out is affordable housing, workforce housing. Talk to me about how much you're selling them for. Talk to me about how much you're renting them for. Then we'll determine if they're affordable to workforce. I was talking to a group a couple of weeks ago, and we continue to use the term affordable housing. Housing must be affordable. And I said, well, you know, we define affordable as 30% of your income. Are you in support of developments that are creating rental units or home ownership units that allow you to pay more than 30%? And then we'll get the comment, well, it's just a guide. Well, either it's a guide or it's something we need to stick by. And then if we're going to stick by it, we need to work with the development community. We need to work with our lenders because our lenders play a big part. We need to work with our realtors. We need to work with all of the parties that are involved in the process so we can ensure these programs are going to be successful. Our workforce housing program is a testament that the program can work. Other communities should take a look at that. One of the things that I'm really happy to see with regards to our workforce housing, at least over the past few years, is that more developers have opted to build as opposed to buy out. Again, I understand that we're in a capitalistic society and our developers want to make money, but at some point, when does the neighborhood, when does the community actually matter? And so we need to make sure that we're working with our developers, we're working with those, and we're helping them to connect to the neighborhood so they can have some sort of understanding and appreciation as to why we don't want gentrification in this community, as to why we need affordable housing in this community, as to why our workforce needs to be able to live in the communities that they work in.
Thanks, Jonathan. And speaking of developers, I'd actually like to move over to Andrew because I know that you're working across the Southeast, and I'm wondering if there's any other policies or programs that you think have been helpful in enabling the development of affordable housing.
Sure. Yeah, Jonathan, I think that the program you have implemented in Palm Beach County helps promote more mixed income developments, which have a number of benefits, you know, socioeconomically as well. So I think that's definitely the right direction that we're going in. I think you know, local governments have a lot of you know, tools at their disposal to try to incentivize the right type of housing. And you know, one simple way is tying green certification, you know, standards to funding, to permit issuances, et cetera. But you know, they could go a step further, possibly with you know, having funding mechanisms that are very clearly linked to measures that go kind of above the typical kind of green standards. As an overall industry, we've seen that it's now pretty commonplace to have things like Energy Star appliances or LED lighting, low flow fixtures, native landscaping, you know, things of that nature, just to name a few. But there's things we could do to go a little bit of a step further, but are costlier. And then you run into having to balance priorities between delivering affordable housing, keeping costs down, but also ensuring that it's resilient. And I think that's where government entities can step in and maybe fill in that extra gap that could be created with things like there are replacement, you know, to steel rebar, for example. That's a big component of concrete structures, which is what you typically see in South Florida. Epoxy fiber as one example. But those things cost more money, and the industry tends to shy away from it. But if there's, you know, specific funding tied to that, it could have a lot of benefits. In terms of resiliency too, because not just that the concrete production is itself an intensive process that's bad for the environment, but it's also not as durable in the long term in South Florida, as you've seen, because of the steel reinforcement. Similarly, there's other technologies that people are experimenting with around mass timber and other substitutes that are more environmentally friendly in their impact. But those things that are more innovative and on the cutting edge requires government flexibility also with respects to their codes and what they're used to seeing. But they could really be at the forefront with funding incentives to try to help reduce some of the risks that might be associated with going out on towards a new relatively untested construction method.
Great, thanks for sharing. I actually want to move us on a little bit because we are just flying through this panel, and I want to actually start with Lori on this question because it's important to think about the funding sources that we can access through state and local governments, but that's not going to get us the full way there. So have we seen any innovative new programs or financing mechanisms to ensure that affordable housing is able to address resiliency yet still get built? Lori, let's start with you.
Thank you, Lauren. And I just want to thank my colleagues for saying what you just said. And I'd like to plus up what Jonathan said before about the issue around, having the resources in communities. I also want to say that we also have to have the carrots and the sticks to make sure that, the 30% will be the do not exceed for rent, right? We have to have something that backs up those important points, because if it's not, the free market will take over and people will be forced to pay more money than they have. But on the carrots end, Lauren, I'm glad you mentioned the question of funding, because there's some good news that I'd like to share that we're all looking at right now, which is the House just passed one of the most unprecedented funding bills for 50 years. We've got infrastructure money coming into our communities, and hopefully we'll have the Build Back Better second tranche coming into our communities, which will be funding for housing, social services, economic development, and already agencies are getting ready to spend this money. On top of those federal funding sources coming in, it's worth noting that the Justice 40 initiative, which is a leading objective of the federal administration, the Biden administration, commits that agencies must commit 40% of their funding and program resources to achieving support for disadvantaged communities. This is really important because that means that 40% of funding and program support that agencies are given through this federal funding has to go towards disadvantaged communities. This has never happened before. And we have close to $2.3 trillion coming out. Do the math. But in order to get to the place where we can see funding coming into the communities that we serve, our communities, disadvantaged communities, as defined by the federal government, we need to make sure that our communities, that we have capacity and support for writing those applications, setting up those projects, and administering those funds, because that's going to determine whether or not our communities get the support necessary. And housing is going to play a critical role in this, because affordable housing gets right at the heart of what the core human rights needs of communities are. So there's going to be a lot of affordable housing dollars coming in, written into the bills. We have close to $480 billion coming into affordable housing. The other thing I would just say is there's BRIC funding through FEMA that also is going to be directed towards pre-disaster support for communities. It is important, and for everyone on the call that is with the city or state, if you're with DEO, if you're with the state office of resiliency in Florida, please know that it's important for you to ensure that you've got the input from your jurisdictions so you can advance proposals and applications for affordable housing and for support for disadvantaged communities when the NOFAs start rolling out. And I'm happy to talk about this afterwards, but I just wanted to relay that to everyone.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Lori. I'll open it up to the rest of the panel if anyone else wants to touch on financing.
Lauren, I'll jump back in here. Again, one of the things, and I love the tout our workforce housing program is one of the things that I really love about it. One other thing I love about it is the fact that developers will have an opportunity to build more market rate units as a trade-off for providing those workforce housing units. So it's not as if we are mandating without providing incentive. But what I would love to see happen is that we look at what's a reasonable return on our investment from a development perspective, because what I'm starting to see is costs are increasing, and I get it for new developments. Materials cost more, acquiring of land costs more, but we're starting to see cost increases in existing projects. We're starting to see an HOA fee increase for residents over $100 a month because changes are occurring. And I get it. There are some reasonable increases that are happening, but we want to make sure if we're going to keep developments affordable, that all of the costs are not being passed on to homeowners, especially if we're doing that at the expense of developers not impacting their return on investment.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Andrew or Jennifer, would you like to chime in about financing? Okay, I'll move on to the next question because we still have plenty to go. So when it comes to design and construction, and this gets a little bit to what you're talking about, Jonathan, there's an increasing amount of pressure on the industry to find ways to incorporate more resilient and energy efficient features into affordable housing. At the same time, as Lori mentioned earlier, we're facing and continue to face an affordability crisis. Have you seen any promising innovations in the construction field that ensure high quality and resilient construction, but also helps or does not decrease affordability?
Again, I'll jump in. I know some of my fellows will jump in as well. There are different things that can be done. I love Andrew mentioned it earlier about some of the things that they're looking at, some of the things that are coming across their desk, and I think those are promising. When we look at certain things, for instance, exterior paint colors, if we can, do something different to reflect the sun and reduce the heat gain, we're doing those things. Andrew mentioned the Energy Star, when we're taking a look at the types of roofs and the insulation, the types of ACs, and just trying to make sure that the homes that are built are built to last and built to be strong. There are a lot of things that are out there, and some of these things are trial and error. I will say though, when you look at new things, we expect that costs are going to probably be a little different. But I would rather have the quality product that's going to last a lot longer than something that is cheaply made or put in. I mean, I understand maybe the code allows it, but it's not the highest quality product. Let's look at those things. Let's compare those costs, and let's see how we can continue to build not just an affordable community, but one that is resilient.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jonathan. And actually one thing, and this is maybe where I would like to go to you, Jennifer. We know that there are often benefits beyond just building resiliency, but benefits that may extend to the community, whether it's health or safety. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're thinking about that and how you're seeing that pop up within communities?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the work that we've been doing on heat, it's you kind of can't take the health piece out of those discussions. I mean, it's inextricably linked. And I think even in a place like Miami, we've wondered, well, doesn't everybody have air conditioning? And one of the, a lot of people, I don't know the exact percentage, but a lot of people have air conditioning. The issue is a lot of people can't afford to run air conditioning in a meaningful way that actually keeps them cool and keeps their body, at a temperature below 104 degrees. So I think there's definitely kind of a recognition. I think, having, Jane Gilbert and Dr. Holder, appointed as the Heat and Health Task Force for Miami is a huge, precedent for everywhere. I mean, I think these issues are, obviously Miami, we have a different kind of relationship to heat than a lot of cities, but I think there are small changes that we're seeing or we're considering. There's, I think in a lot of cities, there's requirements to have heat in buildings that your landlord is liable if you don't have heat available. So there's been a recent bill at the state level to require air conditioning. I think there's just a lot of kind of things that almost seem second nature. A big thing is with the, our sort of surface coverage and tree plantings, that there's, a direct relationship to, not just the safety and the kind of health that it gives you, but it also sort of helps define a neighborhood. And I think that kind of, ties everything together, that people feel better when they live somewhere that makes them feel better, that, they're not experiencing air pollution on the same kind of level. I think I am very pleased and kind of, I feel optimistic with a lot of the great ideas and thinking that are out there about creative strategies, about, like Jonathan was saying, with things as sort of seemingly basic as a paint color really can make a difference on a roof or a building or a street. I've told Lori before, but I think enterprises, there are strategies for multifamily affordable housing. That's sort of this amazing catalog of resilience strategies, from the very sandbags, very, very inexpensive, to much more, high impact, but higher cost. I think sort of shows that there are, interventions that are available kind of at every kind of cost point along the way.
Yeah, I'll jump in briefly there. I'm just on the topic of parking, and in South Florida, we're still very automobile dependent, and something that we're starting to see more movement towards is just that, like black asphalt surface parking lots, like without a lot of trees around it. Those are really bad for a number of reasons. And that's something that if we can get away from as an industry, it would do a lot of good. And you're seeing a lot more municipalities now also have requirements in place for electric vehicle charging stations, which is the right approach to start getting everyone ready for, a future where the majority of cars on the road might be EV. And if you have to go in and retrofit and do that after the fact, it's a lot more expensive than doing it at the front end. And other things to try to encourage, less reliance on automobiles, building near mass transit, having good facilities for those who might ride bicycles and things of that nature.
Lauren,
Go ahead, Lauren.
I want to add, there's something to be said about the importance of operating and maintaining a building well, and investing in it year after year, and making sure that you fix the cracks before they become fissures, that you fix the leaks before it leads to mold, that buildings should be built to stand up for 100 plus years. And the problem in the resiliency space is we sometimes ask for really kind of sexy things, right? Like put your boiler on a roof, elevate the 300 unit building, which is not reasonable. And thank you, Jennifer, for the call out for the multifamily strategies guide. Sometimes the best thing to do to just keep that building strong is to operate and maintain it. Do your wellness checks. Tell your insurance broker, I am going through my building, I'm going to check for wellness. I'm going to look around and see where I can kind of heal it and make sure it's fortified, because that can often be the best thing you can do to make sure that that building is going to hold up against a storm. And it's not sexy. It's not something that you can necessarily get on the front page of the Miami Herald, but it's something that will help the building, and it's the cheapest thing you can do. And a lot of owners just don't have the resources to do it. So I would also add that we need to think about that as a community. How can we get more operating dollars into the buildings? I work with a lot of public housing around the country. This is one of the biggest issues that has led to the failure of a lot of public housing, frankly. And it's a shame, because we lose affordable housing.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Lori. I think that's really important to note that not only do we need affordable housing, more affordable housing, but we cannot lose the housing that we have. Ensuring that it's operating properly and that it has that affordable housers have access to the funds they need to maintain it is just vital to ensure that the residents are happy and healthy and comfortable. We're nearing the end of our time already. So I just wanted to move into one last question that I'd like you all to answer, which is, what makes you hopeful or excited about the future of affordable housing? I know we've been talking about a lot of problems and challenges, but I'd love to hear what you see as an awesome potential for the future. Let's start with Jennifer.
Okay, that's a great question. I think there's a lot to be excited about and hopeful for. I went this morning, there was a groundbreaking in downtown Miami in Brickell for a new development that I think is related with the county, with the school board, to create a new school and housing for teachers. So I think there is so much really interesting, cool potential. One of our tools in our office that we've created is the land tool, which is a mapping tool that looks at all the vacant properties that are potentially developable. There's a lot of land. So when people say, where are we going to put affordable housing? There's nowhere to build anything. There are places to build it, really creative places, transit oriented. So I think there's a lot of kind of thinking and momentum and energy around that. And that makes me very excited to see these places, to see parts of the city that had been, vacant land that are now being populated for a much better intensity and use.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, that co-location, whether it's, a school, childcare, libraries, we're seeing examples pop up all over the country. Thanks for sharing that. Lori, you want to go next?
Well, I want to give a shout out to colleagues at HUD right now that are trying to make a difference. We have some really amazing people inside of the agency right now for the first time in a long time, and inside the White House that are really trying to do the right thing for the nation. And I feel really excited about what they're thinking about and what they're doing and all the great work happening, Jennifer's tools and all the great initiatives Jonathan and Andrew are leading. So I feel that we're at a good moment and we have permission for the first time in a long time to speak truth to power.
Great. Thanks, Lori. Andrew?
Sure. I'm hopeful that it's been promising to see that at the federal level. There's been a lot more discussion about affordable housing than typically, and even it being part of presidential debates, and that's typically wasn't part of the national conversation, and it definitely is now. And I think that's very promising. And then from a top-down standpoint and from grassroots bottom up, like Jennifer was alluding to, in our own communities here, I'm seeing a lot more innovative public-private partnerships and various entities coming together to try to address affordable housing, and so I'm optimistic for the future.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm hopeful and excited because we're starting to get a lot more attention, a lot more people at the table, and that's where I think it's going to start. I remember a few years ago, I was sharing some frustrations with local realtors because sometimes as the seller's realtor, they were not embracing buyers who were coming with down payment assistance. And so a lot of our buyers lost opportunities. Now, fast forward a few years later, you don't have to be an affordable housing buyer. Now you're a regular person and you're competing with someone that's paying cash. And so now that the crisis has hit the community, we're starting to get everybody at the table. I'm excited because we have everybody at the table. Now it's going to be up to everyone to work together to solve the issue.
Thanks, Jonathan. Absolutely. We do need all of those voices at the table to help us really understand the best path forward in all of this. I really want to thank the panel. Y'all have brought up some amazing examples of things happening around the Southeast Florida region and nationally as well. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And I hope that we can continue to be having this type of discussion. It's really important. And I'll hand it back to you, Russell.
Thanks, Lauren. And in closing, I just want to thank you, Lauren, for moderating this panel. And thank you again to the panelists, Jonathan, Andrew, Jennifer, Lori, for a great discussion. There were a lot of questions in the Q&A, and I apologize we didn't get to go through all of them, but rest assured, we will send some of the questions to the panel. And so we do have another pair of concurrent sessions for you to choose from this afternoon. They are Fertile Grounds, Innovations for Climate Smart Agriculture, or Resilient People and Places. So to join the next sessions, please go back to your CVET portal and click on the link for the next session. Again, thank you everybody and have a great rest of the afternoon. Bye-bye.